Hello, welcome to our 26th video in our Through My Bible in 1 Year series here at St. John's. With the end of this video and the end of this week's readings, that'll mark the halfway point. Hard to believe that we're halfway through the Bible, and as we mentioned to the group that gathered on Saturday to do the monthly discussion, there's still so much left to look forward to that we are grateful for. All the books of the prophets and the rest of Israel's history, and 2 more Gospels to look up besides various epistles of Paul and Revelation. But this week you read the Song of Songs, a book unlike any other in the Bible, and I'd ask you to pick out some especially vivid pictures from the Song of Songs, and then to ask yourself too what the main message of the book is. I picked out just 2 passages, one from the woman's point of view, chapter 2, verse 3. Like an apple tree among the trees of the forest, so is my lover among the boys. I desire to sit in his shade. His fruit is sweet to my taste. And then from the man's point of view, chapter 4, verse 7, you are altogether beautiful, my darling. There is no flaw in you. We have language in the Song of Songs that we just don't have anywhere else. And it almost makes you take a step back and go, oh, what is going on here? Why are we talking about such personal, intimate love in God's Word? Well, that should prompt the question then in our heads, what is the purpose of this particular book? And to understand that, we go to passages like Ephesians chapter 5. Verses 22 through 28, where God says that human marriage is really a picture of the love that He Himself has for us. So God uses something that adults can all relate to, male and female relations and desires for each other, and then He uses that as a metaphor for the loving care that He has for us. So many other details we could talk about with the Song of Songs, who wrote it. Apparently it was written under the direction of King Solomon. And who is this woman and this husband? I tend to think it is actually Solomon himself and his first wife, who very well may have been the young woman who took care of David before David, Solomon's father, died. But in a more in-depth study of the Song of Songs, we could talk about that. Then as he went through 2 Thessalonians, along with finishing up 1 Thessalonians, I asked you, what underlying issues can you detect that prompted Paul to write his second letter to the Thessalonians? I think there's a little something in each of the 3 chapters of 2 Thessalonians that gives us some insight between the lines. Chapter 1, verse 5 says, this is evidence of God's righteous verdict that resulted in your being counted worthy of God's kingdom, for which you also suffer. So the Thessalonians were being persecuted, and Paul wanted to strengthen them. That persecution apparently came from the members of the Judaizer party, the ones who insisted on circumcision and other rites of the law that had to be followed from the Old Testament, and they tried to make New Testament believers do that. That was a problem that troubled all of the New Testament congregations at one time or another, it seems. In chapter 2, verse 3, we read, let no one deceive you in any way, because that day will not come until the falling away comes first, and the man of sin is revealed, the son of destruction. Here's the first time the man of sin, or the Antichrist, is mentioned. So the spirit of Antichrist was already in the churches Paul had established, including the Thessalonian church. And we remember what Antichrist is. It isn't someone who sets themselves up in direct opposition to Christ, but rather alongside Christ and says, yes, Christ is wonderful, but you need me too. Then the ultimate, of course, Antichrist is the Roman papacy. And in chapter 3, verse 10, we read, in fact, when we were with you, this was our command to you. If anyone does not want to work, he should not eat. So another problem that prompted this epistle was that some were using the freedom of the gospel to claim that Christians didn't have to do any productive earthly work, that they could just sit around and expect God would take care of them and finally take them to heaven, when God, of course, has purposes for our earthly lives, and we, in our day-to-day lives, honor God by fulfilling those responsibilities God gives us. As you go on reading in 1 Kings and also 2 Chronicles this week, I'd ask you to consider what details concerning the construction of the temple do you find especially interesting. Now, of course, this isn't the same temple that Jesus walked around. This is the first temple, Solomon's temple. And you'll be reading both the Chronicles account and the 1 Kings account of the construction of the temple. And then as you move into the first epistle to Timothy, the first 5 chapters of that epistle, note the trustworthy sayings and see why they are trustworthy and why they are so important, even while everything in 1 Timothy is important, why these are especially important to consider. God's blessings to you this week, and God's blessings as you move on through the second half of our Through My Bible in 1 Year program.